exactly that, where it's basically you're being told that you're going to die, right? And there's nothing you can do about it. And that dream was worse than actually dying in a dream, right? Being told that you're going to die in a dream, right? And it's the worst. It's the freaking worst thing ever.
So I think part of this is like really religious. I don't know, brainwash is the right word, wrong word, but really that, just like the worst parts of your religion coming true in your brain. Yeah. I remember I was in high school, and I had a dream about like rapture, like the second coming.
Yeah.
And I've had so many of those up until I got to a point where I just kind of disconnected myself from it so bad. But man, these were like,
dude,
these were so real. And I distinctly remember I was in my hometown at a library where I used to work, and there was a school bus, and all the kids were just like, for some reason we were all running from something, but we didn't know what. It wasn't anything that was going to catch us, but we were just in a hurry.
Yeah.
And I remember with the kids, like they were just in a hurry, and I didn't know where I was taking them, what I was going to do. But I just remember seeing like this like godlike figure, like the whole everything turned orange,
right?
And then I remember looking up and seeing this godlike figure, and I remember him distinctly like going come and put his hands down, and I just felt myself like raise, and then I woke up and I just like in this pool of sweat and just like tears down my face, and I like remember running to my mother, just like what the fuck was that, you know?
It was pounded into us, this kind of, it sounds like a very similar piece. This, like, you better be ready, like,
100%,
mentality. Like,
100%.
Like, to the point, like, when you're, like, a 7-year-old, 8-year-old kid, you're like, fuck.
And you know...
Like, that's a mind fuck.
And you know...
At 8.
You know what we did after that? We went to church.
Yeah. And so, it was to the point to where one of the local churches, because you kind of have, like, this little cohort of churches, they're all kind of, like... We're like the good churches; those are the not so good churches.
Dude, it was the same thing.
You know, you don't. They don't believe. They're not real. Yeah. They're not real believers. They get loosey goosey with the Bible. You know,
they're not a Bible based church.
They don't use the King James version. They use the other one.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of that. Can you believe that? But to the point to where you're talking about Halloween. This is even worse, right? So they went through the same thing. It's like we don't do Halloween. They did trunk or treat type of thing where you go to the church and they do like candy. It's a church fall festival. It's just fall festival, right? So there's some scarecrows and a pumpkin and some candy and usually a baptism on the side or something. You know? But one church that they're friendly with, they're like, let's play into this Halloween thing, right? Let's do, instead of a haunted house, they did a hell house. To where as an 8-year-old kid, you can pay a very cheap admission and go experience what it would be like if you did not live a life free of sin.
Oh my God.
Right? And I'm not, I mean...
That's worse. That's worse than a haunted house.
To where I was like, again, I'm like 10, 12 at this point, and it's like people like screaming in hellfire, right? In this hell house.
Oh my God.
And like you're going in, and the whole like storyline of it is like you were a bad kid, and you didn't repent, and you didn't follow the word of God. And now, like you talk about, like psychologically damaging things to children.
So one of the worst things. So in that same line, when I think about, it's always associated with my thoughts of infinity and forever. Mm-hmm. Like those just seem like words, and it just seems like a really big number. You know, like it doesn't really seem real.
Right.
But what bothers me when I think about death and life, it's like before me and after me, it always happens.
Right.
And it never ends. And then when I think about the concept of never ending, it's just like, do I really want to be around forever? You know, even after this, regardless if it's good or bad. Mm-hmm. And you just think about like, so when does that end? Yeah. And you're like, so there is no end. And then you get down that road of like, so what do you do with yourself if there is no end? Right. And if there has never been a beginning, where was I before this? And then you start thinking about these like altered states of like altered different personalities. And then when you think about the notion of hell, you're just like, if that is your normal, I mean, it's not normal because people are supposedly screaming and there's fire and brimstone around you. But if that is your normal, there's no way that you're suffering for eternity. Yeah. You get used to something eventually.
Right.
And then that's where you get down to, well, it's just really hell compared to where, bliss is supposed to be. And it's just like,
Like the whole like what was the like Hitler and a pineapple thing with little Nicky? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
It's like daily pineapple thing.
Yeah. God, little Nicky, nice pull. That was a good. Yep.
But yeah, so you know, like all roads lead back to Neil deGrasse Tyson. I think that's kind of the moral of the story here. But Neil deGrasse Tyson gave a pretty interesting kind of talk on that. Somebody asked him that question about his thoughts on like afterlife. And I really liked, and I'm not going to try to say this because I'll absolutely butcher it. I'll just Google Neil deGrasse Tyson afterlife, and I'm sure you can find it. But he basically went into this little short story on basically your energy being everlasting, right? That at the end of the day, the parts that were of you that created you were here before you, and they'll be here after you, and that you are forever, right? It was a really interesting kind of the star dirt talk, which is pretty interesting. Which is kind of ties into what you were just saying. I think it's an interesting way to look at that. That the bits of you will be here for all of eternity, right? It might just not be in the same form.
Right.
They'll be in other forms.
Yeah, it might not be in a conscious form,
right?
But
exactly.
it's going to be there.
Yeah,
and that part of you just. So when and it's such a terrible thing to have a 7-8-year-old, and I'm not damning religion in any way or my religion.
No,
but I don't think they understood the impact that they were leaving.
I think it was as we were talking with some other things before we kind of jumped into this podcast, was that I think it's one of those situations where it's trying to be helpful and it only harms, right? Because so this is the vivid. Let me paint this picture for you. This is the one that's etched into my brain, right? This is a vivid picture that I have of probably say 16-year-old girl from that church that's an actor, right, in this play, covered in blood. Right, and they talk to you when you go in there, and they tell you why they're in hell. And she gave us this whole spill that she was in hell because she had an abortion, right? And then she's going through this spill about how she had an abortion and she's in hell and she's damned to hell forever while her child is in heaven. And it was just this. Oh my God, dude! Right? It's just you're going like, and then here's a red like that. So if the most terrifying haunted house, I guess that's really the story here, is going to be put on by a bunch of Christians.
Oh my God!
But it was kind of like the cheesy portrayal of like every kind of rapture movie you've ever seen, and kind of like where the folks that don't make it in the rapture movie go. Like that was the haunted house. Like the haunted house that played well into any of those kind of crazy, kind of cheesy rapture movies you can find on Netflix or Amazon or anything like that.
What was the one with the guy from Growing Pains?
He's like the premier. He's the premier Christian actor in every one of these freaking movies because you see his face. It's like that dorky face, right? And he's just like rapture time.
Yep. His last name is Seaver. What the heck?
He's made an entire fucking living off of rapture movies.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Growing Pains, 100% rapture movies.
Like, how many times is this dude going to get left behind? You think he would learn it at a certain point?
Left Behind. That's what it was called.
It probably was. Yeah.
You know what was funny is movie like the same kind of church trips. They're like, you can't bring any music that has cussing in it. The only CDs you're allowed to bring are by it has to be like Christian music. So
you can't have secular things.
Yeah, any music you bring, any movies you bring, they can't be anything like non-church related.
Too worldly.
But they will put Left Behind in front of you, which is more scarring. Look at the dreams I was having.
Right.
I didn't have these dreams because of like. Because I was watching a scary movie. I watched fucking Left Behind. I was heard these stories.
You were shown the scariest movies because it's scarier because it's being sold to you as real, factual information, right? So I could back to the point, right? As we were kind of dissecting kind of beliefs and superstitions and kind of horror movies that we'll kind of watch and won't watch and kind of stuff like that. I can watch a slasher film and be like, oh, okay.
Yep.
Right? You put Left Behind on, right? It's like, well, that's just when you're 10-year-old you, and they're like, that's what happens if you don't listen to the shit I'm trying to tell you. Right? See that? Look at that. Yeah. You grow up, love Jesus, don't do drugs. You're going to end up left behind.
100%. Left Behind.
Oh, man. Well, what do you say? Is that it?
I think so. I think I'm going to end up having vivid dreams again if we keep talking. So. conjuring up too many bad memories.
Well, that's it. No, we don't want to end on that. You'll be texting me tomorrow and be like, "Holy fuck!"
Yeah,
I had like the worst.
On the uplifting kind of side, can I plug my podcast?
Absolutely. So that's I should. That's why I should use some notes. We never use notes around here. That's speaking of things that are of the devil. But so you have a podcast, and we were just talking about Native representation and some of those beliefs. So it has to do with that, right? Like it has to do with some of that stuff.
I started a podcast. It's called Native Film Talk. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We got a website up, nativefilmtalk.com. It was really started because I'm Native Navajo, and I see the occasional op-ed, the occasional BuzzFeed article of people talking about Native representation and misrepresentation. And I studied a lot of Native film. I was a Native American Studies major and environmental science major in college. But Native American Studies, I had a lot of focus in film and representation and kind of how that frames people's idea of where we are today. And the podcast is, it's called Native Film Talk, Natives talking about natives in film. That's really all it is me talking about my perspective. And I one day wanted to hear another native's perspective about just any movie. And outside of Pocahontas and, a few egregious ones like The Searchers, where people have played redface and throughout history, where it was just kind of like white guys putting on some rouge and makeup to be natives. And like outside of that, there wasn't really anybody talking about stuff. So I go over, I'm 5 episodes in. I just dropped Pocahontas. I've reviewed Parasite, and I've also done Wind River, if you've seen that. It's a Jeremy Renner film. And then I have an intro episode there. And I also try to tackle one moment in history. So if you're familiar with the 1973 Oscars, when Marlon Brando refused to accept the Oscar for Best Actor in his work in The Godfather, he sent Sacheen Littlefeather up to the stage in his stead. And that was kind of a big Oscar controversial moment, but that framed Native representation in film. So I try to tackle one of those a month, and I come out with a new episode every week. So thanks for letting me plug it, Sam.
No, and so it's really, really good. That's one thing that I will say. It's super good. And for me, I enjoy it just because it's such a... Again, it's a perspective that you don't hear on those kind of films, right? Because you said, just as I think it's really interesting to hear your perspective on those, because a lot of the films that we were chatting about before, we kind of grew up around those, seeing those. Like you mentioned Pocahontas, like that's right in both of our kind of right there, right?
Yeah, we were
right
7, 8, 9.
Mid childhood,
came out, yeah.
Right? So it's really interesting to hear your perspective, and I think people out there will really enjoy it. So it's I don't know, I just like hearing different folks' perspectives and unique perspectives is good. And again, the intro music is pretty good too. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Courtesy of Sam Goodman. So Sam helped me put together the intro for that. It's a pretty awesome intro.
I haven't checked out the website though yet. So it's up. The website's up. I'll have to check that out.
Yep.
Social media, Instagram. You said, right? Are you on Instagram?
Instagram. We have a Facebook page, but Instagram's where I put most of my stuff.
Hopefully, you're developing a mailing list too. You're getting all that stuff ready, getting everything.
I'm trying to get on my Sam Goodman.
That's level. What I'm saying is, so everybody out there, go. The thing that you need to do is you need to go over there and you need to click the subscribe button. That's the number one thing on the podcast. Subscribe to his podcast. Make sure you're following on Instagram. I'm sure if there's anything, but I'm basically saying anything to sign up for, you should sign up for, right? I mean, 100%. Just show some love and sign up.
Instagram is where I put like the fun facts.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, the Instagram content is awesome because it really kind of follows along with the podcast. It's almost like the supplemental material
100%
to the podcast. So it's really cool. Yeah, it's way more effort than what we put in around here. I'll say that. So I think that's it. I'm officially. I think I had some scary moments. I think that was some really fucking scary stories.
Good deal.
Have you had a really fucking scary experience? Have you seen a ghost? Have you been on a macabre adventure? Would you like to share it on air? Would you like for us to tell that story? Or you just have something horrid that you would like for us to talk about? Head over to pellhorsemediaco.com. Use the contact form to let us know all about it. Make sure that you subscribe. New episodes come out every single Friday. We look forward to continuing this creepy, crawly, morbid, macabre, and grotesque adventure with you, the listener. We love you, and we will see you soon.